We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Who counted among we the people when our Constitution was new? Well, not very many people.
It is the voice of a group of people who've surveyed their circumstances, diagnosed them, and decided to change their lives.
Among the delegates were dandies in silk suits and men who looked like the Puritans of old. There were flagrant womanizers, confirmed bachelors, and one newlywed in his 50s.
The greatest, the most lyrical, the author of the most famous words in American history. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And also the most racist.
This is My Constitution, a podcast from the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement at Purdue University. In this episode, we'll discuss freedom of religion. In this episode, we'll discuss the freedom of speech. In this podcast, we'll discuss the powers of the presidency. In this episode, we'll discuss the work of the United States Supreme Court.
Have you ever changed your mind because of an oral argument?
Yes, I would say, but very rarely.
I usually have to write 2 or 3 drafts pretty much from scratch before I'm reasonably satisfied.
Most people think they have a right to come to the court. For the most part, you don't.
These podcasts are about 20 minutes each, so they're convenient, they're easy, and they're quick to watch whenever you'd like. They're basically just snapshots into American history, our founding, how it affects today's society and politics.
It's a breakdown of the history behind these amendments, what has guided them, the legislative arguments that have been used in order to get to certain Supreme Court decisions, and how what impact and legacy these leave on our current status in America.
In 3, 2, 1. This is My Constitution, a podcast from the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement at Purdue University.
They really try and use storytelling so you can picture it inside your head, because this is just audio. These podcasts really bring in storytelling through a narrative series. You have the overview of the narrator, but then you have excerpts from outside sources, interviews with firsthand sources, professors from all over the country.
He said, "Please tell my friends in South Carolina that if a single drop of blood is shed against the United States, I will hang the first person I find from the highest tree."
They really try and use storytelling so you can picture it inside your head.
We will marry free today.
It rendered the voters of tens of millions of Americans who have gone to the ballot box and said that marriage should be between a man and a woman, as it has been for countless millennia.
We'll marry free today.
Storytelling in podcasts is really a really helpful tool for me to kind of process information a lot better.
When Willie woke that morning, he knew he was going to die. The state's mobile electric chair, commonly known as Gruesome Gertie, was waiting for him.
And they walked Willie over to the electric chair, and they strapped him in. The executioner said, "Goodbye, Willie," which is what they said right before they flipped the switch, and then he flipped the switch. Immediately, Willie began to shake in the chair. He started going into convulsions.
Because they take this information, but they weave this wonderful narrative storytelling into it. Where you're learning the history, you're learning the key players. The one that really surprised me, or I guess maybe it's a soundbite that really surprised me, was in the case about the First Amendment and freedom of speech. It cuts to this story about the burning of crosses by KKK members or otherwise white supremacists onto the lawns of black families.
Now, it's my understanding that we had almost 100 years of lynching and activity in the South by the Knights of Camellia and the Ku Klux Klan. And this was a reign of terror, and the cross was a symbol of that reign of terror. Isn't that significantly greater than intimidation or a threat?
Well, I think they're coextensive, Justice Thomas, because it is...
Well, my fear is, Mr. Dreeben, that you're actually understating the symbolism of an effect of the cross.
Understanding these rationale of American framework of why the rules are the way they are, why current events happen the way they do, and why legislation is the way that it is. No matter what you study and what area of life you're in, these current events and these legal frameworks are going to surround you wherever you go.
I think my favorite expert is from Thomas Jefferson that wrote a lot of the Declaration of Independence, and it's called his document.
About 35% of what he wrote was taken out. He later said it was mutilated. And he was very upset by it. In fact, for 9 years, he refused to admit that he was the principal author of it because he thought that the draft that had come out of the Congress was worse than his. And in fact, like many, maybe I would have done it, maybe some of you would have done it, he later wrote to his friends and said, by the way, don't you think this Congress did a terrible job?
So my favorite part about these podcasts is that they're such a convenient form of listening. So as Purdue students, we're always multitasking, trying to get as much done as we can. And so with these podcasts, you can listen on your way to class, in between class, at the gym, while you're doing homework. That's what's really great about them, is that they're convenient. So everyone that comes to Purdue really wants to make a difference in the world. We're producing impactful people every day. And everything in the Constitution and what our founding fathers wrote really impacts every major, every degree, every field that you're going to go into. And I would say that that's why these podcasts really matter. So when you go into the world as a voting and impactful member of society, you know what you're talking about when you talk about the Constitution, when you talk about our government, when you talk about politics. Our government will never change, our government system. The separation of powers, checks and balances, those kind of things will always be important. So knowing why those matter is really important going forward as a professional.
My name is Amanda Shai. I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I'm a rising senior here at Purdue.
My name is McKenna Fitzgerald. I'm a senior here at Purdue, and I'm studying political science and PR and strategic communication.